Good morning, first grade. It is Wednesday, time for our Bible story this week, and we have been talking about David. We talked about when he was what? When he was a boy? That's right, a shepherd. And what was God's plan for him when he grew up? Yes, he was going to be the king of Israel. And we know that he had some lessons to learn before he could become king, like when he needed to be brave enough to fight that giant. And we know it only took one stone, and we know that God was helping him to kill the giant. But do you think the people were pretty happy with David, that they got rid of the Philistines, the enemy? Yes. So David was a great hero now. At first, King Saul was thankful for what David had done. After all, he got rid of the enemy, and he praised David. But then Saul saw how much attention David was getting. He began to become jealous of David. He wanted the people to love him as much as they loved David. So soon, Saul's jealousy turned into hatred. Saul had a son named Jonathan. Jonathan didn't hate David like his father did. He did not become jealous of David. Instead, he loved David more and more. He became David's best friend. He knew that David would be the next king. He wanted to help David. The Bible says that Jonathan loved David as much as he loved himself. Jonathan helped keep David safe until it was time for him to be king. Jonathan knew how to be a true friend. Friends are another of God's gifts to us. We need to thank God for our friends. We need to learn how to be a good friend. Jesus says that he is our best friend. Jesus knows all about us and loves us. He is kind and good to us always. This is how we are to treat those that God has given to us as friends, when the Bible even says, love your neighbor as yourself. David was thankful to have such a wonderful friend as Jonathan. Remember that Jonathan was the son of King Saul, and he could have been jealous of David too, because normally the son of the king would be the next king. But Jonathan's not going to be king. That's God's plan. David's going to be king instead. But Jonathan wasn't jealous. Jonathan had seen David kill Goliath and receive great praise from the people. But he did not become jealous. Jonathan knew that God had chosen him to become the next king, that he had chosen David. But he didn't become jealous. He loved David and helped him for many years. He helped David flee, that means run away, from his father, King Saul, because he wanted David to be safe. David had to run away because King Saul tried to kill him several times. Remember, he was so jealous of him that he hated him and hated him enough to want to kill him. That's not right. Then, after David ran away, Saul took his army and followed David. He planned to find David and have him killed. Several times, he came very close to finding David, but God always protected David. One time, David and his men were hiding in a cave. The cave was long and dark, and they were in the back part of the cave to keep warm. King Saul was tired, so he went inside the cave to sleep, and a soldier stayed outside the cave to protect the king. Saul did not know that David and his men were inside that very same cave. David and his men kept very quiet while Saul lay down and went to sleep. Remember that King Saul had been looking for David for a long time, and he had been looking for him to do what? Yes, kill him. David could have easily killed Saul now because he was sound asleep. But do you think David did that? No. He knew that that was not God's plan. God doesn't want us to do that. So David went up to the sleeping king and cut off a piece of cloth from his robe. Then he and his men left the cave. When Saul woke up, David and his men had left, but they called out to Saul and showed him the piece of cloth from his robe. Saul knew then that David could have killed him. He was thankful to David for not hurting him. He was thankful for a while, but it didn't last. After a while, that jealousy and hatred came back. When we have an evil and wicked attitude, we don't get rid of it very easily. We need God's help. Soon, Saul was once again trying to find David and kill him. David had to run away from King Saul for many years, but finally, David received a message. King Saul was dead. He had been killed in a battle. So how do you think David acted now? Do you think he was glad, say, yay, the guy who's been trying to kill me for so long is dead? No. The Bible tells us that David cried for King Saul. he felt sorry for Saul had died. And now God's promise had been true because David was crowned king of Israel. For many, many years, David had behaved himself and acted wisely in all his ways, and now God blessed him and kept his promise that David was king. But we can also be thankful for Jonathan, who helped keep his friends safe from his own father. So on your workbook page, page 85 here, looks like this. David and Jonathan. Our word bank for our crossword puzzle is David, covenant, sword, and love. And Miss Wilson's already filled it in if you want some help here. So on number 3 going down, it says, Jonathan loved who in the same way he loved himself? His friend's name was David. And on 1 going down, it says Jonathan and David made a what? Because of their what for each other? Well, another word for a promise is a covenant. Kind of a long word, I know, but it's another word. They made a promise to each other to protect each other. And because why? For their love for each other on 4 going across. And then finally 2 going across, Jonathan gave David his what? And robe to wear. He gave him his own sword to use in the battle. And then it says to take the letters from the circle. We have an S, an R, E, I, N, and D. If you unscramble those, I have it right here. This says David and Jonathan were friends, right? Again, that was using the words from your crossword puzzle that were circled. And on the back, speaking of how to treat our friends, there are some words to fill in the box here if that is how you should treat your friends. So should we be jealous of one another? No, so I crossed that out. Should we be rude? No, our Bible verse said love is not rude. Should we be giving? Yes. Should we be kind? Yes. Loving? Yes. Helpful? Yes. Unkind? No. And friendly? Yes. So we're going to fill in those 5 words up here. They're right over here for you to see too. And on the bottom, it says to what other words can you think of how we should act toward our friends. So we already had a lot of good words up here. So I thought maybe you should encourage one another. You should be happy. Nobody wants to be around grumpy people. That's not fun. We should be happy so people want to be around us and happy with each other. And then how God uses us in many ways on page 87 on your workbook page. It says to write the correct word to finish these statements about David. So many jobs David had. David was and it shows right here with his friend Jonathan, he was a friend. And we know God's plan was for him to be king. When he was young, he was a shepherd. Here he is catching the little lamb that fell off the cliff with his shepherd's cane there. And then we also know he was a musician, like some of you. He could play the harp. So if you need to pause on any of those so you can see the words for Mrs. Olson's help, feel free. If not, I know you're smart and you can look at the words on your paper. All right, so I need you to be a good friend, well, especially your brothers and sisters today. They can be our friends too. Some of those times, those are the only times you get to see, or the only friends you get to see right now, so be kind to one another. Love you.